If it's not easy to use, officers won't use it. Usability in policing software is just a non-negotiable. Policing is about people and not paperwork. Great technology allows officers to be out in the communities they serve and not sitting in police stations filling out paperwork. I'm Reuben, the Managing Director at Smudge, and I'm here hosting a short series of videos with Superintendent Mark Donaldson from New Zealand Police. Mark, it's great to have you here. Thanks for taking some time for these videos. Can you give me a short background about your policing career and what drives you in this work?
Yes, thanks for having me, Reuben. So my career is coming up 20 years now. So most of that was spent in Dunedin, in the Southern District, being on the front line as a PST constable and a sergeant on the front line as well. Did a wee bit of work in the custody space before becoming the OC station in Dunedin. And during that time I had a chance to dip my toes in with a bit of technology in the mobility space and was able to do the initial rollout in 2013 of our iPhones and iPads, and that sort of led me to here. About 6 years ago I went to Wellington and I kind of never left, although I still live in Dunedin.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you. You would have completed a lot of paperwork as a constable.
For sure.
Which form took up the most time before we build these apps, and how often did you have to stay past your shift to get them done?
It was a constant, to be fair. Probably the biggest one was always our sudden death files, and we still paper generated in that space. But in still reality, family harm was by far the most we do on a regular basis. And the family harm form obviously evolved over the years to being, a little bit of information to what we used to call the Pulse 6000. It was massive, it had a lot of information in it, and we were collecting a lot of data for not so much police use. So that was probably the biggest by far.
And what have you seen since we've built these tools to be mobile? What have you seen the change and transformations been from a usability perspective?
Well, the changes are probably the biggest thing is that they're all in one place. What we had with paperwork was you'd have a form for everything, and most of them were in triplicate. So you had to spend a lot of time filling them out, making sure the pen went through, and everything would go through the supervisor, and a big red pen would go right through all your paperwork. And it was, to be fair, it was part of the learning process of doing, a good job. But with technology, everything was in the right place. All the data that we were collecting was more structured, and it could be used more effectively. Even just having to be able to reuse the objects such as people and vehicles, locations, items, etc., having that ready and available and just being able to reuse it across multiple forms was a game changer for us.
So when you say just having it all in one place, do you mean some of what I've seen in the past is that you'd have forms and they might not have one in your car, and Correct. So you'd have to get someone either to drive one to you, or is that what you're talking about?
You're absolutely right, yeah. So your bag that you'd have at the start of shift would have your normal jackets and stuff that you'd need to, for safety and keep yourself warm and all that sort of wonderful stuff. But you'd also have multiple folders with offence reports, traffic crash reports, family harm reports, driver's licence suspension, you name it. We had something for everything. Yeah. And you're exactly right. When you didn't have one, someone would have to drive one to you.
Which is it, even just that in itself is a big time-saving usability that you go,
sure.
Here's one device, you can do all the reports in this one place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So one of the things I really enjoy about working with your team is because you understand the business and user requirements. I've seen some other situations where software checks a compliance box but doesn't actually help the business or the user do their job better. Why do you think this is an area that you care about so much?
Well, I think the one big call out would be around the intuitive nature of the applications. On duty, for example, we've been using that as a platform for quite a while now, but over the years we've consistently put new paperworks on it. And when we put new paperworks on it, normally in policing or anything else, you'd come with a training, this is what you need to do, this is how you'd use it, probably a big change program. With Digital Notebook, we don't have any of that. So one of the latest ones that we released was the EBA, and we didn't give any training. We had a small change program to say we want you to use on duty now and not the forms, and that was pretty much it. And because we were able to use the intuitive nature of the app, zero training required, people were able to pick it up, they knew how it worked, and it was just another form they filled out, and it was so easy for them. It was great.
That's great. It's a great story.
Yeah.
I think, for me, one of the things that's surprising about police is just how much police operate in hugely different environments. There's officers in cities, rural areas, on the front line responding to everything from routine stops to critical incidents. It's a large group of users, got different needs, and they're often working under pressure. What do you think are some of the most important ways that we work together to create usable tools across these roles?
Yeah, not just different users, but different attitudes towards technology as well. So you have it across the board. We have some single station officers that hate technology, and then others that love it. Also in the metro area is exactly the same. Meeting their demands has always been a challenge, and we used to have a bit of a different mindset, I guess. That was always, what is the business problem we're trying to solve, and the technology would have to solve that issue first, and then the user becomes secondary. We flipped that on its head working with Smudge, that the user really needed to be the first buy-in. If we could get their buy-in early and make it as easy as possible for them, the business would get the outcome they wanted, instead of reverse engineering the other way, which we have in the past with some more monolithic applications that serve the business need but not always the user need. And because we take that sort of approach to it now, we generally pick up around 80 to 90% of people off the bat, and then there's always that 10% or 20% that you need to work a little bit harder with, or you just don't worry about so much.
Yeah. So it's a big part of the usability of getting feedback directly from frontline officers.
Absolutely. It has to come from them. Otherwise, myself, for example, I'm a police officer, first and foremost, but people in districts, because I'm from headquarters, would consider me, well, you're just from headquarters, what would you know about frontline policing? And that's a fair argument, because I haven't been on the front line for a long time. So it's only fair that we go and actually ask the people that are having to face those demands in the field now, because they may have changed, and likely would have, depending on where you are.
It's so different being on the tools to having previously been on the tools.
Yeah. As much as you'd like to think that you still know exactly what you're doing, you really don't. It's my colleague and I, two colleagues and myself, last week got to spend a time in Southern District. Went to 9 stations from Metro right through to the smaller stations through Central Otago, and all amazing people doing great things, but all different little stories. And you hear just new challenges that you just didn't face yourself, So if you're not hearing that, you're not really responding.
Yeah. I think one other thing with usability is not often a set or forget kind of process. One of the challenges is it doesn't just happen in isolation. And a good example for me is with safety alerts. There's been a lot of work that we've done in recent years to standardise colours and meaning across not just the mobile apps, but across police systems more broadly, even including the documents, presentations. And it sounds so simple to do. I'll just make the colours the same, right? But there's history, priorities, different workflows across all the teams. That kind of standardisation makes a huge difference to usability because it reduces confusion, improves speed, it makes the tools more intuitive to use, but counterintuitively it takes so long to actually make happen. And so I really appreciate that usability isn't just surface level. It's not just, let's make the apps look pretty. It's, let's get the design right. Why is it so important for police to think about this holistically?
It's interesting. We just had a conversation with Dan around product development and what that actually means versus the business outcomes. And I think the thing that I sort of think about most, and making sure this is consistent across the board, is that cognitive load that our officers actually face on a day-to-day level. We don't want them thinking about stuff they shouldn't have to think about. So we shouldn't have to ask them to think about different colours, meaning different things. So having that holistic approach, and they just know off the bat, it's like the lights at an intersection. When it's red, you stop. You don't think about it as being so much red, you just know it's red, I'll stop, and green, it's go. And if you don't have that holistic across the apps, then you're just building an additional cognitive load that our people don't need. And we actually did a bit of testing on this with some of your people and some of our developers and testers and business analysts around what does it mean to actually use our apps under cognitive load versus just using them when you're doing a bit of testing in the office. And we put them under that cognitive load by putting them actually in situations like a family harm situation or a mental health situation or a vehicle stop situation, and watching them trying to use the applications under cognitive load was very difficult. because they're just not used to it. And you ask them, well, what did you see when you actually looked at that QP? And they said, I remember some red, and I remember trying to find if they had a license, but I don't remember much more than that. But our officers are trained to think about that, and they just know that those colours will just mean certain things, and they're a heightened risk depending on what's in front of them. And if you don't have that on every app consistently, it's just going to break them.
Yep. It just makes so much sense, right? That when you're on cognitive load and you switch to another application, if it's not the same, you're just not picking up the same amount of information.
Exactly right. It's really underestimated how powerful it needs to be when you're moving through an ecosystem. There's that consistent look and feel across the ecosystem. If you change something, it just doesn't make any sense.
I really enjoy the way that we work with your team because you understand how it all fits together, the business and the user requirements. I've seen other situations where software is all about checking a compliance box, but it doesn't actually help the business or the user do their job better. I think we're talking a little bit about why we think this is so important, but can you just elaborate on that a bit further?
Yeah, the compliance, and that's that whole building the business requirements out first for the business and not the user, and you start to drive a lot of load that actually doesn't get used anywhere. And we're kind of going through that a little bit with family harm, and I only use this example at the moment. It's because the family harm report in On Duty was built around an eyes wide open feel around we want to know everything that's going on with that particular family. But it's created a situation now that all family harms are treated equally when it comes to reporting, and it has become quite compliance driven that you have to do these things, otherwise you can't submit the paperwork. But in reality, a lot of the situations they're going to don't require that compliance level. They just require a little bit of reporting here and there to make sure that we're doing a good job, make sure the family's first and foremost safe, but then we are collecting enough information that's relevant for what we're trying to do as a police force. The compliance side of things, which is where we're at the moment, we collect a humongous amount of data that potentially may never be seen, but it may be useful for other organisations. And there's an argument we're going through at the moment around what is the hybrid approach to this, that our officers can't spend that much time at every event, just really around compliance. And it's a risky place to be, but it's an organisational risk that we have to understand first and foremost, and then apply the right tools for our officers to do a really great job, but not at a compliance level.
If you were getting someone else to do this job and you're saying create really great usable software, what are a couple of things that you think would be really important advice that you give them?
Go talk to your users.
Yep.
First and foremost, understand what their role is. Your customer's always going to be your number one. But it's a balance, right? So I often find that some of the innovation stuff that we've done in the past, our officers would never have asked for or never have thought of, but we're taking those ideas to them and getting their feedback. And they go, can you really do that? Like, yeah, we can. And they go, well, wow, that's awesome. So there's a sort of, you can't rely on everything coming from your users, and certainly not coming from the business, but us actually being innovative around knowing our users, knowing where they're going, knowing where the police is potentially going in the next 5 to 10 years, and what does that mean for us? What does it mean for our technology? And we're lucky to have this 2-day workshop at the moment. We're actually discussing that with Digital Notebook. What does Digital Notebook look like in 5 years? It could be completely different from what it is now, based on what the organisation wants to do.
I think it's a really great observation about getting feedback from users, but not only feedback from users, also having a vision, taking something forward and bringing people along with you. And there's such a balance there between, if you only ask people what they needed, then you'd have stuff that wouldn't make sense with the wider vision.
Yeah, and the Digital Notebook, like I said, it's a good example. So we've been using a notebook for 130 years. Like it's pen and paper, pencil and paper. It didn't really evolve. The only real involvement of the notebook over the years is now some people use a bigger notebook and they have 2 pages, and if that's 130 years of evolving a notebook, then it hasn't gone very far. And we've flipped that on its head. And it's not because we went just solely and asked the users what would they need from a digital notebook, because we'd probably just get, well, there's a note thing on the phone already. You could just use that. Or why can't you just use OneNote? Because because that's taking notes and it's a digital form and it can be reused. It's like, okay, well that's fine. But what if we could do this? Would that be of value? What does it mean for the organisation? What does it mean for the user? And you start asking those questions, and all of a sudden you get this much bigger, wide view of what digital notebook can be. And it's not a paper notebook we put behind class. It's like this, and this is how we're going to transform how we're going to use it with the organisation, and how it can make policing much safer, more effective.
Mark, thanks for your time today. It's a pleasure to support police creating tools that make an impact for our frontline police. The best technology is the kind you don't notice because it just works. And when officers don't have to wrestle with their tools, they can focus on what really matters. And that's why usability is more than a feature. It's the foundation of making something truly useful. This is the sort of work we love here at Smudge. Our expertise is best used where technology needs to disappear into the background, helping your team stay focused, efficient, and in control without the software getting in the way. If you want to know more about how we approach these challenges and create solutions that truly work, head over to smudge.com.